Welcome to the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by JockMKT. JockMKT is where daily fantasy sports become a stock exchange. You can buy and sell shares of players with other users in real time, make money every hour, every minute, every second of every game. Daily contests are available for Week 14. NFL IPOs are now available. You can download the JockMKT app and use the code ATHLETIC10 for $10 in free play when you make a deposit. It's pretty simple. Make any deposit, enter ATHLETIC10, and get a free $10. Again, download the JockMKT app and use Athletic10 as the code for a free $10 when you make a deposit. Take control of your fantasy sports experience and download JockMKT now in the App Store or Google Play Store. I'm Derek Van Riper. It is Week 14. I'm joined by Jake Seeley, Brandon Funston, and Michael Beller. Ed Mellion will join us shortly. As always, we are here to help you. Now that the fantasy playoffs have begun, you can send our questions on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching our show this morning. Good morning, gentlemen. I just want to assure you I am not a part of a hostage video. I am fine. I am in the underdecorated Studio B of the Athletics Midwest offices. So hopefully after the holidays, we'll have some nice decorations here for future Studio B use. Hoping I get a 0 out of 10 on Room Raider, though. That's my real goal for today. Let's start with some injury news, and we'll go to the guy with the best backdrop on the show. We'll go to Jake Seeley with this one. Myles Gaskin went on the COVID list on Saturday. Savon Ahmed is out. So Deandre Washington, is he a pick-up and play option in leagues where he's still available? He's going to be a bit chalky in DFS for Week 14, Jake, but what's your expectation there given the makeup of this Dolphins backfield?
I think you expect what we saw last week with Devontae Booker as a similar comparison, is mostly because Washington's also not 100% himself, but it really comes down to volume, and he's going to be the lead option. We've seen they don't want to run Patrick Laird. They don't want to run Lynne Bowden. They don't want to do anything. Like, Lynne Bowden's going to get receptions, and Laird's going to get receptions, and they promoted Elijah McGuire, who, guess what? Pass-catching running back. So you're going to get 12, maybe 16 carries out of Washington. Hope he's healthy. The good news is the Chiefs are more beatable against the run than they are against the pass, even pass-catching running back. So I'd say RB3 flex, but as you mentioned, you pick him up, desperation play. If you lost Gaskin, you plug him right in, or similar options. I mean, there's people out there pinning their hopes on Frank Gore right now.
Unfortunately, yeah, there are. And it's too bad because Ty Johnson is a lot more interesting by comparison if you'd have had an opportunity to make another run at 20 touches this week. Brandon, I want to go to you. Julio Jones out again today. So Calvin Ridley gets a bit of a bump, of course, in terms of extra attention from Matt Ryan, but he's also going to get more attention from the Chargers secondary without Julio out there. Is this a Russell Gage must-start situation today with extra targets available in the Falcons passing game?
No, definitely not a must start. We've been down this road before. 3 games without Julio Jones. I believe Russell Gage is averaging like 25, 26 yards without a touchdown. Like, this hasn't been an automatic thing for Russell Gage. And really, since week 1, when he went over 100 yards against Seattle, he hasn't really done a whole lot of anything other than find the end zone a couple times. But the yardage hasn't been great with or without Julio Jones. And really, it's not a slam dunk for Calvin Ridley. In those same 3 games, Calvin Ridley has not finished as a wide receiver 1, but he keeps getting, like, double-digit targets. You can kind of feel good about that. And so, I mean, I guess Calvin Ridley is fairly safe, but I just think this whole offense as a whole, it's bad when Julio Jones is out. And so I think you got to downgrade all your Falcons.
Beller, I want to talk to you about the Giants offense today. Daniel Jones expected to start that game against the Cardinals. So whose value goes up in this Giants offense with Jones returning and taking the reins back from Colt McCoy?
The first answer here is everyone's, right? I mean, you have Daniel Jones in there. Obviously hasn't been the big step forward for him this season that a lot of people thought it would be, but you still just have a higher floor for the Giants offense. The specific answer is Evan Ingram. Last time we saw Evan Ingram with Daniel Jones went over 130 yards through the air. Last week, not so much. I think you get Evan Ingram back into the easy tight end 1 class, and yes, that is a low bar to clear, but Evan Ingram is one of the guys who I think we talk about in between the Travis Kelce and Darren Waller group and then the hope for a touchdown group. He's a guy who can still get you to where you want him to be without finding the end zone, and right there, that's beautiful at the tight end position here in 2020. So Evan Ingram, for me, the biggest gainer by virtue of Daniel Jones making his return this week.
Yeah, I definitely think the Ingram floor goes up for me with Jones back under center. We got a running back situation in Houston that remains in flux. No David Johnson again this week for the Texans. So, Jake, what does this mean for Duke Johnson and CJ Procise?
It also means a bad matchup because they're in Chicago. So Duke Johnson, very similar to what we're talking about, like the Giovanni Bernards, and we just talked about Deandre Washington. It's all these guys that you're going to get volume. You're going to be the lead option. You know you're walking into guaranteed touches. These are all your floor options. If you have a solid team, you throw them out there as your RB2. You know you're going to get points. The ceiling is very low with a lot of them. I don't think Procise is going to get involved too much. He wasn't involved before. David Johnson was rumored to come back, and I don't think that he's going to see much difference now. It's still going to be Duke Johnson, the majority of the backfield, but that's how exciting you're going to get. 60 yards, 70 yards, I think that's the range you're hoping for.
Good morning to John. He's got a nice checklist on the screen there. Eggs, bacon, Sealy. It's a good Sunday morning.
Did he say link? And I didn't see that if he said link because it was a checklist.
Sausage link, maybe.
Yeah, sausage link is probably at this point. We're going to get to a lot of questions here in just a few minutes, so keep those coming. A couple more news items we want to get to. Brandon, this Deandre Swift situation is weird. Of course, he suffered a concussion a few weeks ago, and it looks right now like he's going to play. We're going to get the official word here in about 25 minutes or so. Are you expecting Deandre Swift to have his typical pre-concussion workload? He was taking over this backfield before he got hurt. It's obviously a great matchup against the Packers, but are you scaling back expectations even if he gets the green light today?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how you can really feel good about this. I mean, it's the whole situation's weird. I guess, technically the Lions aren't really out of it. I think Minnesota at 6-6 is the last team into the playoffs, and the Lions are 5-7. So they have something to play for. But I don't know what's going on with him. But I guess if he's out there and he's playing, I can consider him in a flex kind of way. I just would not consider him the featured guy. We've seen Adrian Peterson step up, score a couple touchdowns each of the last 2 games, get over 50 rushing yards. I think we're going to go back, if Swift does play, to something sort of earlier season-ish where he was maybe pushing double-digit touches, but if he got there, it would just barely, and that Adrian Peterson will be mixed in liberally as well.
I would wear a check the sausage link shirt, by the way. And again, this is coming from a guy with a completely blank wall and what looks like a blank dark T-shirt on. I actually do have a flex T-shirt on today. There is a pop of color in my world.
There we go.
And I've got a matte black coffee mug too, so it really does look pretty dire over here. But things are actually great, even though it doesn't look like that from a visual standpoint. Beller, one question for you on the other side of this Packers-Lions matchup. Matt LaFleur said the team is not going to put Allen Lazard on the field for 60 snaps in this matchup against Detroit. If he's playing half that many snaps, is he viable in season-long leagues, or does he sort of fall into that dreaded fringe wide receiver 3 range for you where you're trying to find someone else to play?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably looking in another direction first, but I'm not running away from Allen Lazard. This is a very skinny tree offense, right? We've got Devontae Adams and Aaron Jones doing it every single week. Jamal Williams gets the opportunities that he gets, and we're still looking for that consistent second pass-catching option. Lazard has shown it a little bit. Robert Tonyan has showed it a little bit. But at the end of the day, we're talking about an Aaron Rodgers-led offense that has been very good all season, put up 42 points on the Lions when they met back in week 2, and I don't see this Lions defense slowing the Packers down whatsoever this afternoon. So even though you would like Allen Lazard to be out there a little bit more, and I would go towards someone who is going to get more guaranteed volume, the Packers are going to put points up. Allen Lazard is going to get 6-7 targets in this game, and he could very easily turn that into 4 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. There's no bad way to invest in the Green Bay Packers, really ever, and certainly against the Lions today.
Good morning to Olivia, a good friend of ours from our social media team here at The Athletic. We're going to help as many of you as you can. Let's try to get to a dozen questions here before we start breaking some games down. We'll fly through these as quickly as possible. What do we have here? We got Mini Jordan. Good morning, guys. Who'd be the handcuff if Dalvin Cook were to go down for week 14 and week 15? So, Jake, if something happens to Alexander Mattison at this point, who is the preferred handcuff?
Nobody. Tough noogies. This is what happens. Not everybody has a backup plan that you want on your team. So unfortunately, it would be a split backfield, potentially committee. If Madison even comes back, don't waste your time. Find somebody else to stash.
Yeah, it'd be a pretty deep league if you're going to take a shot another one of Boone or Abdullah at this point. Trevor wants to know 14-team PPR league, pick 2 for a flex out of Boyd, Shepard, Dobbins, DeAndre Washington, or Duke Johnson. Then we'll kick this one to you, Brandon.
I'll go J.K. Dobbins, and I'll actually go Sterling Shepard, who's coming off a bit of a stinker against Seattle. But Look, he was targeted a lot. You look at Arizona; they have been not good against against slot receivers. So I feel like Sterling Shepard's going to have a big rebound game. I think Dobbins is the number one choice. The other guys might argue my Shepard pick, but I think Dobbins is unassailably the first one there.
All right, let's get to Brad's question. Can we trust Jacobs this week, especially in the 4 p.m. window? Can pivot to Wayne Gallman in a half-point PPR league. What do you think here, Beller? Get a couple practices out of Josh Jacobs late in the week.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like Josh Jacobs is really all that questionable. I actually do a show with Vic Tafur, one of our 2 Las Vegas Raiders beat writers, and he's been saying all week that this is, pretty much a go. They've got to throw an injury designation on him because of NFL rules, but he didn't sound concerned at all when I talked to him on Friday if Jacobs was going to be available. So I think you're going to be pretty comfortable riding Jacobs. I understand maybe wanting to go to Gallman just for the sure thing, but if I were in your position, Brad, I would feel comfortable waiting it out for Josh Jacobs here.
Next question's from Ian. Hey, all half PPR. Need 2 from Landry, Deandre Washington, and Kiki QT. Yeah, we're going to get a lot of Washington questions and QT questions coming off QT's huge game last week. Which 2 of that 3 do you like, Jake?
I'm going to go with Landry and Washington. I know a lot of people want to be on QT with no Cooks, but it's similar to what we've seen from other wide receivers when they get the number 1 attention. It's a lot to ask for QT. I know Hanson's going to be out there too, but they could both easily shut down in this matchup. More boom or bust with QT, but I feel the safest play there is Landry and Washington.
One other thing we're keeping an eye on, too, with that Houston offense, the availability of Brandon Cooks. We'll see how that plays out in the next 20 minutes or so. Luke wants to know, hey, guys, great content as always. Please, can you help me choose between Gallman, Drake, and Mostert? Choose one of that 3, Brandon.
I think I'm actually going to go Gallman. It's been good consistently, and I'm not afraid of the Arizona matchup. I got questions I am afraid of the Mostert matchup against Washington, and we're past him being kind of matchup proof. Last week kind of showed that. So to me, the safest play here is Gallman.
All right, let's get to our next question. This is from Humboldt Parker. Duke, Sanders, or DeAndre Washington in a full-point PPR league? Who do you go with in that spot, Beller?
Yeah, well, first of all, Humboldt Parker, I assume you're a fellow Chicagoan, so I'm very happy to be answering the question here. I'm assuming that Sanders is also Miles, and that's the direction where I'm going here. We had a lot of talk about Miles Sanders on the Athletic Fantasy Football podcast all week between me, Brandon, and Jake. Brandon and I a little bit higher on Sanders than Jake is. Understand the concerns. Obviously has not been what you expected of him really the last month or so, but I still think that he has a high touch floor there, a very high ceiling, and Jalen Hurts can't be any worse for the offense than what Carson Wentz has been. With as bad as that line is, you like someone who can get out and move around the way that Hurts can. So I think we see a different look from Philadelphia, at least enough to get Miles Sanders into starting fantasy lineups.
And you have to wonder if they'll go a little heavier with the run to take some of that pressure off of Jalen Hurts. That could be a good thing for Miles Sanders as well. Taz wants to know, Jake, why so low on Mike Davis this week? I thought he has higher upside than even Chubb, with Denver bleeding 9 rushing Ts over their last 3 to 4 games.
First of all, stop with the why so low. He's RB16. That's not so low. God. But we love Taz because Taz is a regular viewer. But, yeah, how high do you want to put Mike Davis, Taz? Mike Davis, before Christian McCaffrey was even going to come back, hasn't looked that good. He's been average, honestly. And so I think that what you're looking at for Mike Davis is kind of a better version of the volume guys we were talking about before. I think RB16 is very fair, and I would have put him inside the top 10 just because he wasn't looking that good before Christian McCaffrey was supposed to come back anyway.
Yeah, I think some of the appeal has fallen from Davis. The ceiling's not quite as high as it was earlier in the year. I am the reason wants to know, Mostert, CEH, or Washington in a PPR for the flex spot. What do you think here, Brandon?
Man, I'm hesitantly going to say CEH. Things have been down in Kansas City in terms of the volume in the backfield, but something tells me that maybe they're going to try to make that a little bit more of an emphasis this week. I don't think Kansas City wants to go into the postseason with the backfield basically giving them nothing. So I'm expecting a little bit more emphasis there, and maybe they get CEH going out in the passing game a little bit more as well. But I can say that just because the other 2 options are big question marks as well.
Yeah, definitely a tough spot to be in. Christy wants to know, Dobbins, Gio, or Antonio Brown in the flex. It is a half PPR league, and Christy writes she needs a solid floor as well. Who do you go with there, Beller?
Yeah, either way, whether you need the solid floor or not, I'm going J.K. Dobbins, and that really just drives the hammer home that you need the solid floor for J.K. Dobbins because there effectively is no floor for Giovanni Bernard or Antonio Brown. We've seen Giovanni Bernard's production just go in the tank after Joe Burrow's injury, and Antonio Brown comfortably the number 3 receiver behind Mike Davis and Chris Godwin, and potentially even just the number 4 pass catcher when you throw Rob Gronkowski's usage in the red zone into the mix too. J.K. Dobbins, even though we're seeing a little bit more Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards than we would like to see, J.K. Dobbins clearly the best running back in that backfield, the most talented, the most explosive, 11 carries, 71 yards, and a touchdown a week ago. Huge game for the Ravens on Monday Night Football against the Browns. They need this one with the way the AFC is shaping up. Feel very good about the J.K. Dobbins usage we're going to get on Monday.
We got it already. Taz with a quick apology to Jake there. I don't think any harm was intended with that question, as Jake suggested. Mark wants to know, would you flex a less than 100% Josh Jacobs or Terry McLaurin in a standard league? What would you do here, Jake?
The kicker is non-PPR, so I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs. Look, I'm as high as anybody on McLaurin, and it was only his second poor game of the season, his worst game of the season. But in a non-PPR, like, unless we're getting fooled by everybody, I just don't see how all the reports are saying that Josh Jacobs is going to be fine. He's going to be out there. If you don't have a backup plan, then I guess you hedge. But wait, is Washington at 1 or 4?
They're at 4.
Yeah, so you can wait. If Josh Jacobs is active, there you go. I'm going Josh Jacobs. That's what I thought.
Next question comes from Bruce Gunther. Kyler Murray or Justin Herbert in a standard league? This was a good problem to have just a few weeks ago, and now it's a little more of a difficult problem to have. What do you think here, Brandon?
I'm going Justin Herbert. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's had really just one bad game, but Kyler Murray, we've seen him struggle. We think he's got the shoulder injury, and we think the defenses have made some adjustments to him. It's kind of affecting him overall. But that being the case, I'm just going to go with the straight-up matchup, which is so much better for Justin Herbert going against Atlanta.
One more question here before we start breaking down some games. Matt wants to know, NFFC overall playoffs, full PPR, swing for the fences with Mike Williams or go safer, good use of the quotes there, on Michael Pittman in the wide receiver 3 spot. There's also a Drake or Dobbins at the flex. I think it's got to be Dobbins in the flex, but that wide receiver 3 situation is a little bit trickier.
Agree with you, DVR. I am going Dobbins in the flex here. I'm going to go Mike Williams. I mean, the safer in quotes says it all, right? We thought Michael Pittman was going to be taking over as the wide receiver 1 in Indy, and forget about what T.Y. Hilton did a week ago. Michael Pittman basically hasn't done anything since those strong back-to-back games that we saw from him. So I know that Mike Williams has a basically 0 floor, but like Brandon just said, with Justin Herbert over Kyler Murray, I really like a bounce-back performance from this Chargers team. After getting embarrassed by the Patriots a week ago, I think we see a much better look from the Chargers offense as a whole. So I really do want all those guys in my lineups this week.
Now, we are going to get to a lot more questions. We're here for more than another hour, here until 12:30 Eastern today. So continue to send those questions in. We'll help as many of you as we can as the fantasy playoffs get underway. Let's start breaking down the games on this Week 14 slate. Let's start with that Kansas City-Miami matchup. Chiefs 7.5-point favorites there. Brandon, you were just touching on this a few minutes ago. It seems like the Chiefs need to figure it out in the backfield and get Clyde Edwards-Helaire going and kind of just have a better plan at running back going into the playoffs than what they've had throughout this regular season. So are you generally erring on the side of pushing Edwards-Helaire into lineups when you can and just saying Le'Veon Bell is just a backup at this point, more of a if Edwards-Helaire gets hurt, maybe then he has some value sort of stash?
Yeah, just you look at the last 6 games, these running backs, there's been 3 double-digit volume touch games in the last 6 games from a Kansas City running back. So, like I said, they've really de-emphasized the backfield, and they're just letting Pat Mahomes throw like crazy. I do think that they're going to try to get that turned around a little bit before the postseason. But this is a good Miami defense, so I'm looking at CEH this week as kind of like here's my flex, here's my flex spot. Do I want this wide receiver or do I want CEH here? And given this offense and the helium of this offense, I'm probably going to lean to CEH in those decisions. But he's kind of a back-end RB2 in that mid-20s range for me. And, yeah, Le'Veon Bell's just sort of an afterthought, an insurance guy that you have around for CEH. But, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at this week.
Jake, I want to ask you, do you have any concerns about Tua Tagovailoa and Devontae Parker specifically in this passing game? Because the Chiefs' defense is actually pretty good, and Tua has been inconsistent thus far in his young career. Any concerns that Parker actually lets us down here in playoff openers?
Yeah, I think there's a concern with Parker every single week without Fitzpatrick, just because Tua is more of the West Coast offense. They're kind of in that transition, which is why they made the move. And you haven't really seen a steadiness to this offense all year long. But Parker is still the number one. You know what? I'll compare it to the running backs we've been talking about. They're kind of in that same, like Duke Johnson, Giovanni Bernard. He's going to get some opportunities, but it just may be lesser than you would expect from somebody of his talent, potentially getting 8 or 9 targets. So, yeah, there's definitely concerns. I would say he's going to fall into a wide receiver 3 conversation for the rest of the way.
Yeah, unfortunate because I liked what he did last year, and I actually thought there was a chance when they made the switch to Tua that Tua could elevate the quarterback play in Miami.
And then lost Preston Williams.
Yeah, I thought that would drive more targets in his direction and continue to bring that value up, but a little less consistent than we'd like. Let's get to the Vikings-Bucks matchup. This is one of my favorite games on the slate this week. I think a lot of people are curious about Antonio Brown at this point, Beller. Is there any reason for bumping him up in the rankings coming off the bye? He's had a little more time to get up to speed in the Tampa Bay offense, or is he just the clear number 3 behind Chris Godwin and Mike Evans at this point?
I think he's the clear number 3 behind Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, but that doesn't mean that you should necessarily just be outright benching him. We talked about it earlier this week. I think, assuming just a normal spread of wide receiver resources across the league, I would say like 3 out of every 5 Antonio Brown managers probably want him in their lineup. He's still in a game where we could see a very high score. We got an over-under sitting at 52.5. Buccaneers favored by 6.5 in this one too, so the script could work out very nicely for him. And a wide receiver 3 in Tampa's offense can still be very productive, and then you also have the opportunity that Antonio Brown is the one who has the best day or the second best day among the 3. Just because he's clearly running 3rd on the depth chart doesn't mean that he is just out of our fantasy lives, right? Antonio Brown and a wide receiver 3 in Tampa is way different than Anthony Miller and a wide receiver 3 in Chicago. These are 2 totally different situations, and there are many different situations like that. There are a few wide receiver 3s who should be considered as fantasy wide receiver 3 comfortable, and I think Antonio Brown is one of them.
Yeah, I think the concern, though, that we all had when Brown went to Tampa Bay was something that Jake brought up on this show and on the pods. It could be like the early season Dallas offense where all 3 receivers are viable, but you don't really know who's going to go off in any given week. It's been a little more consistent with Godwin and Evans being kind of a tier above Brown so far, but I would say Brown has been more startable than not in most cases, at least by process. 52.5 is the over-under in this game, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if this one shoots out. No Kyle Rudolph on the Vikings side, Jake. Irv Smith's going to be back. Is he a viable desperation option to throw in at tight end this week if you're scrambling at the position?
I'm glad you had added desperation after viable. I don't even think he's quite desperation. I think he's just a flyer at tight end. You're looking for a touchdown. Anybody past the past, top 6 or 7 tight ends, you're kind of hoping for that anyway. Even when you get down to like the Hayden Hurst really hasn't seen much of a difference with and without Julio Jones. He's just been remarkably inconsistent in his own right. So if you're going past those top options and you're going for somebody for a touchdown flyer with one of the highest expected scores and the highest expected shootouts of the week, if it goes as planned, he's worth a chance to get, 40 yards and hopefully a touchdown. So, yeah, certainly, I think he's a strong play. I think you'll see a lot of people going to him on DFS and DraftKings and FanDuel.
Yeah, a good punt option at the position, just with the salary being low, it enables you to pay up for something else. But let's get to the Cardinals-Giants matchup. Over-under is 45 in this game. If you think about our expectations for the Cards offense earlier this season, this would have been a bit surprising. The Giants' defense has improved this year. They played pretty well overall, and Kenyon Drake is expected to play through a hip injury in this one. This Cardinals offense, though, has been sputtering. So what do you think about this offense as a whole, Brandon? Do you think the Cardinals can get right against the Giants?
I'm not feeling like overly optimistic about that, given their struggles and given the fact that the Giants have been one of the kind of ascending, emerging defenses of late in the NFL. So I just watched, them dismantle my Seattle Seahawks offense. And, I would be a little bit concerned given how Kyler Murray's played of late and the things that he might be dealing with, that, this could be problematic for the Cardinals. So not feeling overly optimistic about any of these Cardinals this week.
Got a Kenyon Drake question there. We'll kick this one over to Jake. Need 2 out of Kenyon Drake, Mike Davis, and Amari Cooper in a half PPR league. Who sits from that group, Jake?
No, Amari Cooper sits for me. When you get touches like that at the running back position, I don't think you need to risk Amari Cooper. And we saw the report just kind of goes for Andy Dalton. You mentioned it. I think he's very similar to Dak, and he was taking CeeDee Lamb at the beginning of that game. Then he went away from it, started using Gallup and Cooper, and I think within the game, he's not necessarily going to target somebody the entire way. So I'll go with the running backs.
I got a question for you, Jake, about the Giants receivers, specifically Darius Slayton. 2 or fewer targets in 3 of the last 4 games, but for the season, his efficiency numbers are in line with his rookie year. Thinking about Daniel Jones being back under center this week, is there any reason for some optimism with Darius Slayton, or there's simply too many options in this passing attack right now for him to be productive?
There's a lot of factors at play here. There's too many, well, not even too many options. There was too many at the beginning of this year. I was lower than most, and I wasn't expecting it to be this bad than for Darius Slayton. But even before and after Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones is not a great deep ball thrower. So that's one. Darius Slayton broke out last year. Now he's getting the attention of defenses on the outside as a number one, getting number one coverage. That's 2. So you put those 2 together with Darius Slayton reported by Dan Dugan as not being 100% the past couple of weeks. You add another third, and then Evan Ingram is back and getting tons of targets. So now it's just a litany of things going wrong for Darius Slayton in this year. So maybe a bounce back season next season, but I just don't think he fits for what the Giants need to do and then what's happening to him.
Yeah, I do think there is some early bounce back appeal for him in 2021, depending on what happens with that group of pass catchers between now and the start of next season. Let's move on to the Texans-Bears matchups. The Texans offense is better than I expected without Will Fuller. I thought they were going to take a small step back. I'm concerned, though, if Brandon Cooks doesn't play with that neck injury, that they're going to be scrambling in a big way. Kiki QT, we talked about him a little earlier. Of course, he's on the radar after the big game last week, but Chad Hansen might be a pick up and play sort of option for people who are dealing with some injuries at the wide receiver position this week. So what do you make of this Texans receiving core at this point, Beller?
Yeah, I mean, I feel good about Kuti with or without Brandon Cooks. I feel a little bit better about him if Cooks is unable to go. I don't really think the Bears are going to be moving their corners around too much, so not like he's going to be shadowed by anyone. And it's a good pass defense, right? I mean, you're talking about Kyle Fuller and Jalen Johnson. It's a tough corner situation no matter what you're dealing with. If you get in the slot, though, and you get that matchup with Buster Screen, that's been the softest matchup going against the Bears this week. So that could work out very nicely for Kiki Kuti. Chad Hansen, it was nice last week. I'm not putting anything on him. You know, it was more descriptive than predictive what we saw from him a week ago, and I'm not going to sit here and say that Chad Hansen is suddenly some sleeper against a Bears pass defense that got abused over the last couple of weeks by Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford, but still is among the better pass defenses in the league, and I think that pass rush can give Houston's offensive line a little bit of issue here. So Kuti, thumbs up. Hansen, thumbs down.
Definitely some concern there. Dean's Electric wants to know, stick with Watson or Hill or Ryan or Stafford.
Oh, wait, how are you sticking when you have 4 options?
Yeah, I think it's a shallow league with a few good options or decent options on the wire. I think that's probably the situation here.
I'm going Hill. I don't know how you don't play Hill at this point, honestly.
Man, I can't believe we're here. Like, it's just not a place I ever thought we would be. Week 14 of 2020, everybody.
Starting Taysom Hill and DeAndre Washington.
With confidence, starting Taysom Hill.
Feeling good about playing Taysom Hill.
Starting Taysom Hill.
When I literally didn't think he was actually going to take all the snaps the first week he started. I was convinced it was some kind of decoy. Yeah. Jameis Winston's actually the guy. Sean Payton hates us all sort of thing. And now it's fantasy playoffs. Play him with some confidence. Yeah. He's actually looking okay. Let's talk about David Montgomery for a second. He's been playing really well. Got the TD over 100 yards against the Packers. Had a great matchup and crushed it last week against the Lions. Has another great matchup this week against Houston. Will David Montgomery deliver again here in Week 14, Jake?
Absolutely. Well, unless it's everybody's laughing because we know it's David Montgomery. Like it's like we've been buying in, and just feel like, oh, I'm ready to get stonewalled here. But it's a great matchup. David Montgomery has been great on the volume. He, for whatever opinion people have of him, he's been doing great in his great matchups with this workload. And the good news is he's getting the passing game work too, because there's been no Tariq Cohen for almost the entire year. So I think so. If he goes belly up, you just still made the right move. Put it that way.
as it's noted on the screen from S. Boyer, no Buster Screen for the Bears today. So one key piece missing in that Bears defense. Let's get to the Denver-Carolina matchup. Panthers a 4-point favorite in this game. The key news here, no DJ Moore this week. So the first question I have for you, Brandon, is how does this wide receiver situation play out without DJ Moore in this matchup against the Broncos?
Yeah, I think A.J. Bouye is out as well, which is the Broncos' top corner. So that'll be helpful for whoever Carolina has out there, which we think is Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson. So I think that's enough. I like both of these guys. I like Robbie Anderson an awful lot. He's kind of been Teddy Bridgewater's go-to guy for most of the season. So feel good about him. And Curtis Samuel, you can use him in a lot of different ways. I don't see why he wouldn't be someone that could have a good game as well. So I like the matchup. I like the fact that there's two viable options here in this Panthers receiving core, and so I feel good about both of them.
Got some breaking news here from ESPN's Adam Schefter. Brandon Cooks is, in fact, inactive with that neck injury. So, Jake, I know when you look at this group of receivers, it's pretty decimated. We've talked a lot about QT. Is Chad Hansen anywhere on your radar as a startable player, even in the deepest of leagues?
Yeah, it's kind of a deeper play. Like, you kind of go back to the Travis Fulgham situation earlier this year. If he's out there running outside, getting number one treatment, you start to have a little bit of concern. And I mentioned last week, too, is the fact that Sean Watson had pressure in his face almost immediately. So I think he's desperation, and I think that's a good word for him, is you put him out there as a wide receiver four. You saw the ceiling last week, but if he came out of this game with 2 catches for 20 yards, it wouldn't shock me. Yeah,
there's plenty of ways it can go wrong, especially in this matchup.
Fire up Akins. Watch Darren Fells get 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, Akins was pretty chalky last week in daily and was not productive. So this could be the week for Jordan Akins to get that lift. And the Bears actually struggle a little bit against tight ends too. So that could be
Leonard Fournette is inactive, by the way.
Didn't we all think he was going to be the starter by this time of the year when he went to Tampa Bay? We're like, oh, goodbye, Ronald Jones. We'll see you on the bench at the end of the season.
That ruins things. Speaking of DFS, I had a good amount of Ronald Jones in DFS, and now everybody's going to come over to him now. That's annoying.
That will definitely drive more interest to Ronald Jones. Circling back to the Denver-Carolina matchup, Nick Kosmider covers the Broncos for The Athletic. He referred to Tim Patrick as his playoff hero. Is Tim Patrick someone you can comfortably start in a 3-receiver format? I know, Jake, looking at your APA rankings by position, Carolina's been good against opposing wide receivers. This is actually a pretty tough matchup.
I thought you were going to Brandon for that one. I'm sorry. That's the way they said it.
I just thought you had an endorsement deal with some energy drink company, and you had to get the label on screen.
I had to get this is actually a mix of things. Tim Patrick, for as much as I've loved him this year, it's funny. I said this in the waiver column. Brandon knows because he edits it. Said if you don't want him at this point, you just don't want him. Like, I don't know why he's even in the waiver column because he's been under 30% rostership since like week 7. If you wanted him, you got him. If you didn't want him, you didn't want him. You play him if you have him. Like, we know the downside is 3 points, but the upside is 20 plus. He is their number one. And, Carolina, what Brandon says a lot too, Carolina is middle of the pack, solid against wide receivers because they're so easy to run against. But they also have been playing better this year. Like Rasul Douglas is kind of having a bounce back season. So they've been playing better, but they are still beatable. And if they can somehow push the scoring, I would still say Tim Patrick's the number one.
Let's move on to the Titans-Jags matchup. Titans 9-point favorites. Nice 52.5 over-under in this game. James Robinson had a knee injury during the week, but didn't end up on the final injury report. Is there any concern about Robinson, and is there any interest in any of the other Jags running backs as stashes for the remainder of the fantasy playoffs? What do you think about this situation, Beller?
No, exactly like Jake said, when you're looking beyond Dalvin Cook in Minnesota, there sometimes aren't just guys who can step right in through the situation and be the obvious handcuff. I don't think there is one in Jacksonville. If James Robinson were to go down with some sort of injury, it would be a Zigbo and Dare Ogunbowale. It'd be mixing something in. And let's also give a nod to James Robinson just being a special talent. I don't think just any running back is going to step into that Jacksonville offense alongside Mike Glennon and be the sort of player that James Robinson has been. So there are better ways to use your last bench spot than I quote an insurance policy on Devin Zigbo. It's just not going to play out that way.
Yeah, it is amazing what he's accomplished in that offense this season. Speaking of that Jags offense, Jake, here's a question you're going to love. Laviska Shenault, Colin Johnson, maybe too low down in the 60s. What are the chances one of those two breaks out and has a big week here in week 14?
Too low on Colin Johnson, Jake. Come on.
Yeah, 2L Colin Johnson. Here, look, DJ Chark was number 1 in targets, routes, everything. Just pick a stat, except for the production in that game, and he would have been number 1 if he didn't get that Mike Glennon interception. Mike Glennon's good for him, but he's good for Colin Johnson too. But here's the issue with Colin Johnson. He's 3rd in wide receiver snaps and opportunities, so he's going to have to do it on very few amount of plays. It's happened, but I'm not trusting him. And Chenault, here's my easy answer there. You're going to trust he's going to get another 2-defender tip pass for a touchdown? Please put him in your lineup.
Yeah, that was one of the most fluky touchdowns of the entire season. Let's move on to the Cowboys Bengals matchup. Cowboys 3.5-point favorites as Andy Dalton tries to get revenge on his old. Can you get revenge on the Bengals if you're Andy Dalton? Is that even possible? That narrative doesn't seem like it can exist.
I think the revenge he already got was leaving. Yeah. Like that was the rest. It's already happened.
Yeah, exactly. Ezekiel Elliott is a little banged up. Is he still a top 10 back, though, in this matchup? And just how low is the floor for Zeke at this point? Speaking of weird 2020 storylines, Brandon, I mean, I know you're playing him where you have him, but it's not like, oh, I got a top 5 running back. This is awesome. Like, it's kind of different. Yeah. It's sort of like where, I don't know, a healthy David Johnson was at the beginning of the season might be the actual floor for Zeke right now.
Yeah, well, he's dealing with a calf injury as well, so I'm not putting him in as a top 10 play this week. I could see them maybe lightening the load a little bit and getting Tony Pollard more involved, so I got him like 12-13 right now, but you love the matchup. The volume has just been, reliable, and 2 of the last 3 games he's looked pretty good. He didn't look good against Washington, but, not a lot of running backs have had the same situation where they haven't looked good against Washington, so I don't completely blame Zeke for that. I just mostly am worried about the calf injury. And if they do get a lead, which is you can't assume that, and even in a good matchup like this, I would not be surprised if they try to minimize his load a little bit.
Here's a question from Thomas with Zeke included. Who's the odd man out of Zeke, Corey Davis, McLaurin, and Robbie Anderson?
Good problem to have. Yeah. I would say of those, wow. I don't want to toss out Robbie Anderson, but I'm going to. You can go with Robbie Anderson or Corey Davis. Either one. I mean, you really can't go wrong with those choices.
I love the setup for Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson without DJ Moore there, because more targets go to both of those guys in this situation, right? I mean, like the floor goes up they're both startable in most situations anyway, and now you feel even better about it. And obviously going to be very chalky from a DFS perspective as well. Let's get to a quick question here about Giovanni Bernard. People actually like him this week, Brandon. Should they? Like, that seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he should. I think you should think about him as a flex play because he is the guy there. But he's been the guy there for a while and has been doing nothing. This is one game where the matchup is actually one of the better ones he's had, where they actually could still be competitive, I think. So I feel a little bit better than I have in a few weeks about him, but not any more than like a mid-20s RB play that has some volume upside.
All right, let's get to a few more questions here. Try to help as many people out as we can as we move into the fantasy playoffs. Diego wants to know Curtis Samuel or DJ Chark. I'll throw this one to you first, Beller.
I'm going to go DJ Chark here very narrowly. I think, you're basically hoping for one of these guys to hit a big play. They both have that ability. I was a little disconcerted to see just 2 catches for 41 yards for DJ Chark a week ago with his first start with Mike Glennon. But he got 7 targets in that game, and I think Jacksonville's going to have to be throwing a lot today. So I'll lean toward Chark here. I think the big playability is going to be out there for him today.
All right, Blackbeard wants to know Josh Jacobs or Deebo Samuel. What do you think about that one, Jake?
Josh Jacobs. They really keep going back to this again. If he's healthy, he's out there starting, you're getting guaranteed work. And I love Deebo Samuel, but honestly, I just don't know how we get away from Josh Jacobs at this point.
Here's another one.
How about this one from Steven? Josh Jacobs or Kareem Hunt in a half-point PPR league, Brandon?
Yeah, Kareem Hunt we've seen has been very TD dependent, and those TDs have just dried up in the second half of the season. So playing a clear backup to Nick Chubb and now losing some goal line carries to Nick Chubb as well. I would take Josh Jacobs, again, with everything that these guys have already said about how it seems like he is good to go and would be back, assuming he's been one of the biggest volume running backs in the league when he's been out there. So I expect that to continue this week.
All right, next question from S. Boyer. So the Bears pass D has been torched the past month. Is QT safe in the slot, or should I start Antonio Brown? What do you think about that one, Beller?
I mean, those questions aren't mutually exclusive. I think QT is safe, especially without Brandon Cooks in there today. But I think you could also still start Antonio Brown over Kiki Kuti. Very close. Both wide receiver 3s who can play up to a wide receiver 2 level. I would lean very slightly to Antonio Brown here. And it's really just a bet on the Buccaneers being able to get going as a whole over Minnesota. So that's really what I'm betting on here. I'm betting more on the Buccaneers offense versus Houston's offense rather than Brown over QT. This one is super close. I wouldn't fault you for going QT over Brown.
Question from Kenny, DJ Chark or DeAndre Washington in a half PPR league. Who do you go with there, Jake?
It's Chark if you need the high ceiling. It's DeAndre Washington if you need the high floor. It really depends on your lineup there.
Odd man out here. We got that one from Thomas just a moment ago. We got Steven's question there just a moment ago. Matt wants to miss QT talk. Yeah, we've covered him quite a bit. We'll probably come back around on him at some point before the end of the show. CFC fans, safer floor for the defense, Packers against Lions or 49ers against Washington. What do you think about that one, Brandon?
I think floor, you go with 49ers. They're going to have not much of a threat in the run game. You have Peyton Barber, probably not much of a threat to get over 3 yards a carry. So you got San Francisco not having to worry about the running game. And I think they can pin their ears back and go after Alex Smith in the passing game. So I feel good about Washington's scoring numbers being down. Give me the floor of the 49ers.
Got a question here from our friend Slim Shady. Does no Cooks raise Duke's floor in a half PPR league? What do you think, Beller?
Not so much for me. I mean, I guess he almost has to technically raise his floor, right? If this is like a straight yes or no question, I guess the answer is yes. The important question in a fantasy context is, does it raise it enough to the point where I want to play him? And Duke Johnson, as underwhelming as he has been against this Bears defensive front, I would have to be in dire straits if I'm going to throw him into my lineups.
Yeah, Duke and Gio Bernard kind of in the same neighborhood for me, and I think I'd rather play Gio given those matchups. I got a question here from Bothagrius. Confidence in Dallas Goedert or Cole Kmet, higher upside. Is that just overthinking? It feels like overthinking to me, Jake, but how confident are you in Dallas Goedert now with Zach Ertz having one game back under his belt?
The fact that Dallas Goedert's still been top 10 over the past and just continue to get work is essentially the number one wide receiver. This is overthinking it. You know, even if it hits, it was still overthinking it.
Unless Ed Malyon comes on in 20 minutes and says to play Cole Kmet, I think you got to stick with Goddard because Ed's been the tight end whisperer all season. So I don't know how he does it. Next question here comes from Josh. He's a subscriber to The Athletic. Thank you, Josh. Shepard, Edmonds, or Hansen in a PPR flex spot. Please pick one. Who's your choice, Brandon?
Yeah, Jake always says Sterling Shepard is the number one in the Giants passing game. I know he had a bad game last week with Colt McCoy. Daniel Jones is back. And as I said earlier, you can look at the game log. Slot receivers against Arizona have been where they've been hurt in the passing game. Those vertical threats on the outside, they do a good job. But over the middle, you can hurt them. And I think Sterling Shepard will. I think he'll have a good game.
All right, let's get back to a few more game breakdowns. We're going to get to the Colts Raiders matchup. Colts 2.5-point favorites on the road. Henry Ruggs had a couple of late long catches in the last 2 weeks. Obviously a big one last week to keep the Raiders from dropping that game to the Jets. But what is it going to take for you to trust Henry Ruggs, especially now that we've reached the fantasy playoffs? Is he just a guy that you're thinking more about for 2021 at this point? I'll kick this one to you first, Jake.
Yeah, I think Henry Ruggs, you know why? Because I'm the biggest fan of Henry Ruggs. The truth is, he was struggling because he got forced outside, as I mentioned before, with the injury to Bryan Edwards, who was the one that was struggling this year because he was the outside receiver, to continue this theme from guys we've been talking about. You've seen lately, he's been developing as a rookie, as a lot have been. We've seen rookie wide receivers, running backs are all starting to catch on in the second half of the season. It's what happens a lot of times, especially with no preseason. I still think he's boom or bust. He has to do most of his damage on 2, 3, 4 receptions, and he can do it. But and we're not taking it away, but we are taking it away for the fact that Greg Williams tanked that game at the end. Without that, Henry Ruggs isn't even on the scoreboard for fantasy leagues last week. So compare him to like Deshaun Jackson, but Deshaun Jackson is healthy, which is rare.
Yeah, didn't you say it was basically like running a field goal block in Madden when you knew that the other team was going to run a regular play?
The only way
more or less what it was.
That was the only way it would have been more obvious, is if he just had field goal block out there.
That is what it looked like, though. It was just completely ridiculous. The Colts side of this, well, we've been really chasing Michael Pittman for the last couple of weeks. Beller, you and I talked about it on Fantasy Football in 15, but T.Y. Hilton has come back from the fantasy graveyard and put up a couple of big games. So if you're looking at this Colts receiving core this week going up against the Raiders, do you trust Hilton and do you still want to play Pittman? Because my confidence in that receiving core has now kind of replaced my lack of confidence in the running back usage from a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think you can look at both of them as wide receiver threes. For a couple of weeks there, it was Pittman. For the last couple of weeks, it's been Hilton. And it's hard to say for sure which one of them is going to be the best one going forward and even just from game to game. So I look at both of them in the wide receiver three group of players. If I am making a decision of one versus the other, I'm just going to trust the recent form of T.Y. Hilton and go with him. A couple of touchdowns in both of his last two games, that is. Over 100 yards last week. A little bit of a competent production floor from Phillip Rivers that we hadn't necessarily seen earlier in the season. You add it all up, and it looks like a pretty decent spot for T.Y. Hilton. Also, we obviously do not fear this Raiders defense whatsoever. So feel better about Hilton than Pittman. I think they both great as wide receiver threes for Week 14.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately in a position in the flex playoffs where I am playing T.Y. Hilton as my wide receiver three. So I need him to come through to dispose of Christopher Harris. That's my main goal for the week. Have T.Y. Hilton go off and frustrate Harris. Make him as angry as possible. I hope the worst possible players in my lineup go off this week just to put him on tilt for the entire offseason. Let's get to the Jets-Seahawks matchup. Seahawks huge home favorites, 13.5-point favorites, over under, nice 47 there. No Denzel Mims. Jamison Crowder is hurt. This looks like Brashad Perriman chalk week in DFS. Where does he go for you this week, Brandon? How high do you put Brashad Perriman given the issues that the Seahawks have had against opposing wide receivers this season?
Yeah, and we know that they're getting better. And this is the Jets. I don't know if Brashad Perriman, as the clear and present and obvious only guy in the passing game, is the kind of guy that can overcome that kind of a situation. I think this is a bad spot for the Jets this week with Seattle coming off, licking their wounds on a game that they were similarly favored last week. I think they're coming out and going to give it to the Jets. And, the Jets aren't trying to win either, and they got a new defensive coordinator. There's a lot of things going on with the Jets. I think this is going to be an ugly offensive game. I know they've been a little better on offense the last few weeks, but I think this could be a one-touchdown kind of week. I have Perriman as kind of like some upside wide receiver 4 play this week. Jake.
Any love for Perriman from you, Jake?
I know we were going to both of us. Sorry. I think that Perriman's definitely in play. I think that you're talking about it being the number one option with no Mims and potentially sounds like no Crowder too. I would be surprised if Crowder plays after missing practice on Friday, and they promoted Jaleel Scott and Kager. So I would say Perriman's in play. Braxton Berrios, if you want DFS or if you're super desperate in your league and you're searching for options this morning, Braxton Berrios plays a ton when there's no Jamison Crowder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, we got a really interesting tweet here to pass along from Jeff Legwold. For reference, and given Broncos running back Melvin Gordon's court appearance is scheduled for Monday, he was charged with a DUI in October. Last year, Kareem Jackson's 2-game suspension for his DUI arrest was formally handed down December 17th, the day after his court appearance. So, keeping that in mind, Phillip Lindsay might be in line for some more work at the very end of this season, right? If you consolidate touches in that backfield, suddenly Lindsay becomes a lot more interesting down the stretch. Do you agree with that, Brandon?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if you're going to have Melvin Gordon out of the picture, I mean, we know what Phillip Lindsay looks like as a featured back. It's good, So, yeah, maybe he's your playoff hero if that works out that way, and we lose Melvin Gordon for the final few weeks. I'd be in on Lindsay. I know Jake would too.
Yeah, absolutely.
One more question for you, Jake.
Get the DUI narrative now is they're going to run Melvin Gordon into the ground because they know it's his last game.
Yeah.
30 carries this week, right? Yeah, because they know the season ends for him after this. But one more question from you from the Seattle Jets matchup, Jake. You have Tyler Lockett way lower than most people in the industry. Not my words. Those are the words of our producer, Nando DeFino. Still top 24, but your favorite question, why so low?
Because why so high for Tyler Lockett? Why? He's essentially been 20, 30 points or 7 Yes, it could be a Tyler Lockett game, but the rankings are there to say this is who I'm going to start. At this point, look at everybody in front of him. I'm starting all those wide receivers before I start Tyler Lockett. Does Tyler Lockett have a top 5 potential? Always. But most weeks he hasn't been hitting it. He's a great wide receiver too. You know what? This is a good reason why I have him there. I wasn't even thinking of this. Amari Cooper before Dak Prescott. You had to play him as your wide receiver 2 every single week because you knew that upside was there. But there's a lot of weeks where you only get wide receiver 4 production.
That's a good point. I think with Lockett, that feast or famine nature has been extremely frustrating. Clearly, DK Metcalf, the more stable option of the receivers in that Seattle group pass catchers. Let's get to a bunch of questions here. Let's help some more people out. It's Asha Shao. Some of the YouTube handles and Periscope handles are tricky to get on the fly. Deontay Foreman and Darrington Evans are inactive. If Henry goes down, is there a backup in the Titans' backfield?
Hey, Nando. Hi, Nando.
Yeah, there's Nando DeFino joining the show.
Yeah, what's
Give
up?
him this question. Oh.
He loves Deontay Foreman.
I think that's why we got put up
We'll
there.
go to you on this one. Beller. Is there a backup in Tennessee with Foreman and Evans inactive?
I don't think so. Again, there's no perfect answer here. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And part of the reason why we say you don't want to handcuff your starters early in the season is because there are very few obvious 1-for-1 fills. It just doesn't happen very often in the NFL any longer, and we're seeing it play out this season. I just don't think that you would want to do that. If you have really no one else to go after and you want to speculate on someone, you can do it, but almost certainly there's going to be a better way to use that roster spot.
Yeah, it almost seems worse than the Minnesota situation where you don't have a clear-cut guy who's going to just come up and get touches if those guys are unavailable. So nothing there to do from a fantasy perspective. Dalton wants to know Corey Davis or Debo in a non-PPR league. What do you think, Jake?
I love both. Can I just start both of them? Like, where are you that you have to make the decision? You know what? Because it's non-PPR, I'm going to go with Corey Davis. I'm going to go for the bigger plays there.
Pretty high ceiling again for that Titans offense this week. Chico Frenchies wants to know, flex question, David Montgomery or Adam Thielen in a half PPR league? Which way do you go, Brandon?
I just can't go away from David Montgomery because it's about as good a matchup as it's going to get. We talked about Montgomery's schedule down the stretch and how good it's been, and he's been taking advantage of it so far. So because of the matchup, because of the volume, I got to lean Montgomery.
This is one of those things where I just wish leagues didn't have decisions like that had to be made. You got to have more starting spots next year. Kindly ask the commish to open that league up a little bit. Have a few more players that you're going to have in your active lineup every week. Both of those guys should be playing this week. Yeah. Nick D wants to know, standard league start 2, CEH, Hunt, Davis, or Drake. So which 2 do you choose out of that group, Beller?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Again, these are 4 guys who are all in the starting discussion for obvious reasons. I'm going to go Mike Davis as my first play here. I think he is a little bit above the other 4 guys. And, Kareem Hunt is someone who I've been leaning on a lot, but a little bit concerned about the fact that he just hasn't been quite so involved in the passing game. I know this is a standard league, but that's still where we expect him to get his production. So I'll go to CEH here. These guys are all within, a shade of one another, right? These are all very close to each other, but I think just betting on the Chiefs offense is usually a good bet to be making, no matter how little involvement CEH has had over the last few weeks. So he is my second guy here. Mike Davis is the one who stands out above all 4 for me.
Rocco wants to know, do you envision Deandre Washington catching very many passes out of the backfield, considering they are facing the Chiefs? So thinking about game script and usage, how do you see things playing out volume-wise for DeAndre Washington, Jake?
Not that much. Not with Laird and Lynne Baldwin, and they activated Elijah McGuire. I think most of his touches are going to come in the run game. It's not that he can't, but he's also not 100%. I don't think they're going to go out there and give him 20 touches in a game where I don't think, if it wasn't for what happened with Myles Gaskin and everybody else on this roster, including Savon Ahmed, I just don't think that we'd even see DeAndre Washington getting much work to begin with.
All right. Ray Allen's Jumper wants to know, Mostert or J.D. McKissick in a PPR league? What do you think about that, Brandon?
Oh, my gosh, I'm going McKissick. Yeah, how can you not? The guy had 10 catches last week. But, yeah, the matchup's terrible for Mostert. We saw him get shut down last week as well. But I don't see how you, in a PPR league, you don't feel comfortable going into this one thinking McKissick gets at least 6 catches. That's a,
I was about to say 6 too.
Yeah, I mean, and that's probably the floor. And so with that being the case in the full PPR, give me McKissick.
Strange times here in week 14. Ira wants to know, would you play Debo and Brandon Ayuk over Nelson Aguilar and Tyler Boyd? Are you comfortable having both San Francisco receivers with those fallback options, Beller?
I am. No doubt about it. It's not my preferred thing to do, to start two receivers on the same team, but there's no way Nelson Aguilar or Tyler Boyd are getting anywhere near my lineup over a couple of viable guys. We've seen Debo and Ayuk produce alongside one another over the last couple of weeks. No reason they can't do it again today, even with that tough matchup against Washington.
Let's get to a few more questions here. We got a question from Pat. Washington, Boyd, Pittman, AB for the flex spot in a half PPR league, and Pat is looking for some upside, Jake. So who gives Pat the most upside out of those options?
Upside, I'm going to say not Boyd. Boyd is because Boyd got it on one catch. And Washington, if it wasn't for upside, would be the pick here. So you know what? Hope for a shootout. Antonio Brown. If you're going for upside, why not just have fun with it? I'm going with Antonio Brown.
I think that was actually my lean on that one too. To see that game could just be back and forth between the Bucs and Vikings. So you want to get
and enjoy it. It's something to root for. It's like Nando said on Thursday's show with me. Like if you have Jalen Hurts, just throw him out there because you're going to want to root for it and have some fun.
Yeah, it's got to be a super flex league for me to throw Hurts out there, but I'm with you on that principle in those circumstances. Brian is also a subscriber to The Athletic who's been enjoying the work this season. Needs one wide receiver in a PPR league between T. Higgins and Michael Gallup. So what are you going to do here if you're in Brian's shoes, Funston?
Oh, man, I was just checking. It looks like T. Higgins is good to go. He's been dealing with the hamstring injury, but if he's in there, he has been consistently kind of Brandon Allen's guy, and whatever that means, but he's getting volume. His numbers have been decent, so I think he's the safer play. I'd probably lean T. Higgins.
By the way, quick kicker news item. Austin Siebert kicking for the Bengals today. So if you've been using Bengals kickers, make sure you have the correct Bengals kicker or that you don't have the wrong Bengals kicker in your lineup. Little Big Man wants to know, is Jerry Jeudy healthy? What is his slot percentage and how is Carolina versus the slot? It's a nice specific question. What are your thoughts on Jeudy here, Beller?
Yeah, I'm really not trying to play Jerry Jeudy today against Carolina. It's just been a season of fits and starts for Jerry Jeudy, and I think he's going to be someone who's very interesting in 2021. But for this season, we just haven't seen enough floor or ceiling from him to want to run him out there in Week 14. For that reason and that reason alone, this isn't a matchup thing. This is just a fact that Jerry Jeudy just hasn't given us enough. This Denver passing game hasn't given us enough. Another one that would have loved to see what this team had looked like with Courtland Sutton in the fold this season. I will be excited to see it next year. For this year, I'm pretty much staying away from this team unless it's Melvin Gordon for this week.
And Jake's our slot percentage expert, so you have to throw it to him if you want the actual numbers.
Yeah, what's the number on that, Jake? Jake left at kicker, blocked by the question. Okay. Kicker talk, yeah. I'm with you. That's like, hey, that was just the PSA. That wasn't me wanting to talk about kickers. Let's be clear about that. Let's get to a few more questions here. Ed Mallion will join us in just a couple of minutes to help a few.
Hey,
more
hold on.
Well,
I had the answer, by the way. Carolina is actually top 5 against the slot.
And how often is Jeudy running out of the slot?
I don't have that one ready. Leave me alone.
That was a tough question to answer on the fly. Ben wants to know half PPR, DJ Chark or Jarvis Landry. This one says, thanks, Jake. Keep up the good content. So I'm going to throw this to you, Jake. Chark or Landry in a half PPR?
Half PPR is Landry. I want to play Chark this week. Everybody knows that, but he's very much a high ceiling, low floor. If it goes wrong with Mike Lennon again, Jarvis Landry, everybody's concerned facing Baltimore. What we talked about earlier in the show, I said is CeeDee Lamb hit so early and so well because Baltimore gives up a lot out of the slot. So Jarvis Landry for me.
How much out of the slot, Jake?
I can tell you that one. They're actually inside the top 5. They're actually number one. I know this one. They are number 1 in the league in the percentage of their yards to receivers allowed. 2 slot wide receivers. Pittsburgh is number 2.
All right, next question comes from Reggie. PPR league, pick 1 running back and 1 flex. Gio Bernard, Raheem Mostert, and T. Higgins. I feel like you're getting all the Bernard and Mostert questions, Brandon.
Yeah, you want to throw it to somebody else? I also have Higgins the last one as well.
No, go ahead.
God, I
Sit
really
Higgins.
do like Raheem Mostert. I don't like his matchup, and in a PPR, I think Gio, 3-4 catches. I think that's doable. We've been crapping on Gio and what he's done as the main guy, but he hasn't had really good running back matchups. This one is one that kind of sets up well for him. So I think I'm going to go, since you have to choose a receiver, you got to throw Higgins out there, and then you go Gio over Mostert in a full PPR.
All right, got another question here. This one's from Dalton. Corey Davis or Debo in a non-PPR league. What do you think, Beller?
We
this
got this
came up
one.
earlier.
Jake answered this one earlier, but I will make it unanimous with me and Jake at least and say that I would play Corey Davis there too.
I think I'm on Corey Davis as well.
Benjamin help.
Benjamin wants to know Debo, Marvin Jones, or T.Y. Hilton in a full PPR league. What do you think about that one, Jake?
Debo. There you go. And by the way, side note, sad news is it didn't the actor died that played Debo?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, from Friday. Yeah.
Mm.
Yep.
There you go. Let's roll some Debo out there for good news here.
Yeah,
Let's
right.
do it.
My coffee.
All right, we'll get to some more questions a little bit later on in the show. We're going to kick it back over to some game breakdowns. And before we do, we're going to say goodbye to Jake for Week 14. Jake's going to go update some rankings.
good
Any
thing I
parting
jumped
shot
right
for the
in.
group, Jake, before you go?
No, I gotta go clean up Barkley's throw up though, like she did 10 minutes ago.
Oh,
Have
well,
fun.
hopefully Barkley's feeling better soon. Enjoy Week 14, Jake. We'll talk to you again next Sunday. If you want to go check out Jake's rankings, which will be updated after he cleans up after Barkley, theathletic.com/cheat sheet will get you the best deal. Buy one, get one free on subscriptions. Buy yourself a 1-year subscription. Get one to give to a friend included. So that's a pretty sweet deal for the holidays. Let's bring in our guy, Ed Mallion. We're going to break down a few more games. We're going to start with this Washington Football's San Francisco matchup, a 43 over-under in this game, gentlemen, a very low total. The Niners are a 3-point favorite at home. This Washington defense just seems underrated. I know we like them coming into the season, but they continue to exceed expectations. So my question for you, Ed, is there anybody you've been leaning on in the Niners offense that you're steering away from as a result of this matchup this week?
If I had the choice, I might reconsider playing Raheem Mostert in my Dynasty playoff game today. I don't have that choice. So he's going to be starting whatever happens. Big one for me is I think that actually this Washington defense has been built a little bit like that San Francisco defense. A load of first rounders on that defensive line. So you've got Jonathan Allen, you've got Montez Sweat, you've got Chase Young, who is absolutely ridiculous. It's just a great team. It's just a really well-built team on defense. I think, obviously, once they have a quarterback in place, post Alex Smith, I think that Washington could be a really interesting side under Ron Rivera. But no, I'm going to have to play Raheem Mostert today. But I don't think there's a single other San Francisco running back who I'd consider. And usually that's not the case because I love Shanahan.
It's really interesting, too, because Jeff Wilson was the most added player on Yahoo on Thursday and Friday this week. I mean, I think it's more because of the hierarchy in that backfield. If something were to happen to Mostert, it looks like Wilson is higher in the pecking order right now than Tevin Coleman based on recent usage. Is there any other reason, though, people would be stashing away Wilson? Because I think it would still be a timeshare in some form, even if they lost Mostert. It's going to be Wilson sharing with Coleman or Wilson sharing with Jerick McKinnon, wouldn't it?
He's one of the most interesting sort of waiver wire players in fantasy because like last year I picked him up a couple of times. And if he comes in, he will have a big load. And there aren't many kind of backup sort of running backs who come in, take on a huge load, and then just disappear again. It's just that we have that trust in Kyle Shanahan's system. We know that Shanahan himself has that trust in Jeff Wilson. So he's a peculiar player. He's not one that you're going to kind of hold long-term in Dynasty, but he is a player who can come in and win you weeks. And he has done that for me, and he has done that for many other people as well.
Now, Beller, no Antonio Gibson today for the Washington Footballs. How many half PPR points can we expect from Peyton Barber? I think people like J.D. McKissick, but everybody's saying, no, we're just not into Peyton Barber. What kind of output are you expecting from him?
Peyton Barber is going to give you either 2.8 or 8.8 points. He'll have like 28 yards from scrimmage, and he'll either get a short yardage touchdown or he won't. I'm going to bet against the touchdown and say 2.8 points. This is a desperation-only play, and even if you're desperate, you might be able to find something better. We know exactly what the story is with Peyton Barber, and it's ugly. It's not good. It's not a fun story. You want to get away from him. I don't care how many carries he might be in line for.
Let's move it on over to the Packers-Lions matchups. The Lions are 9-point dogs at home. Over-under is 55. That should be the highest total on the board this week. Our Lions writer, Chris Burke, suggested that Mohamed Sanu could be a fantasy playoff hero. It's taken him just a couple of weeks to go from the practice squad to a starting role. Still no Kenny Golladay there, so it's an open competition really for targets behind Marvin Jones. So behind Marvin Jones, Ed, which Lions receiver do you like the most for this week against Green Bay?
You know I'm going to go for Quintez Cephas, don't you? You know, I loved him at Wisconsin. He's a very, very talented receiver out of a college that really hasn't had many good receivers, I think, in the last few years. He's fast, he's strong, he's big. He ran a slow 40 at the combine, which I think damaged his draft stock in a very, very strong wide receiver class. But he doesn't play slow. He doesn't play 4.6. He's a really fast, really strong receiver who can go deep. And I think my biggest fear today is Matthew Stafford, because if that thumb isn't right, we know that the thumb issues can really affect quarterback performance. But Sanu, I think, is a great shout from Chris Burke, who really knows his onions in Detroit.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because they have to air it out in these next couple of matchups, especially this week against Green Bay. We saw Stafford went for 400 against the Bears last week, so I think he could at least go for 300 against Green Bay here today. I'm going to have you guys rank these players, 3 guys in a PPR league. I'll kick it to you first, Brandon. Jalen Reagor, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and Rashard Higgins. If you're trying to rank those 3 players for this week in a PPR league, how do you stack them up?
I think you go with upside with MVS. Always big plays, always in play. You love the matchup. You can see that happening. He's inconsistent, but when you're talking about Jalen Reagor and Rashard Higgins, I think that doesn't sway things here, because that's inconsistency across the board. I'm actually going to go Jalen Reagor and just, kind of go for that rookie to rookie connection. I know there wasn't a big preseason where a lot of times you say, oh, the rookies, they had the rookie camp together and all that. But I still think they're, Jalen Reagor still kind of the quote-unquote number 1 receiver in that offense, for whatever that means. And Higgins got just a really tough matchup against Baltimore. You can hurt him in the slot, but you can't hurt him outside very much. And I don't have a whole lot of faith in Baker Mayfield delivering the ball this week anyways.
Definitely Baker is a concern for me. What do you think of that trio, Ed?
Yeah, I had the same. I mean, like, Jalen Reagor's the wild card, I guess, because we don't know how Jalen Hurts and him are going to link up. Maybe if Jalen Hurts just feeds him the ball, then he's your best guy there. But I love Aaron Rodgers, and I think with Valdes-Scantling, that's definitely the highest ceiling of these 3.
Hoping that Valdes-Scantling can pull in one of those long targets. I've got him darting in trying to win the fishbowl this year. I've got an outside shot of winning the whole thing. So really need a big one from MVS this week. Got a VIP line question for you guys. In a PPR league, Chase Claypool, Tyler Boyd, or DeAndre Washington? Do you have one that stands out from that trio for you, Ed?
The Cincinnati quarterback thing really confuses this one for me. I probably like DeAndre Washington. I mean, it's a weird one, I know, but the running back situation in Miami, covered it earlier on. It's a bit of a mess. I think if he comes in, he was decent out of the backfield at catching when he was in Oakland. We saw him a bit there. And Claypool's going to be one of these great players, I think, in fantasy and dynasty over the next few years. But he's a boom or bust player until he has guaranteed volume. And at the moment, the guy with guaranteed volume is Deontay Johnson. So once Claypool has that volume, he's going to be a WR1 for the foreseeable. At the moment, he's a boom or bust player who gets maybe 4 or 5. He could get up to 8 or 9, but maybe Washington this week.
What do you think about this one, Brandon? It's a VIP question, so I feel like we all have to weigh in on it.
Oh, yeah. I have Washington, too. For me, I would just chase Claypool's touchdown upside. What does he have, 11 of them now? You look at Buffalo, last 5 weeks, they've been a below-average pass defense against wide receivers. So, and the thing about Pittsburgh is, Deontay Johnson is the number 1 guy there, but Claypool's still getting, some looks. And this is a team that's passing a ton. They are basically, I've talked about this all week, using the short passing game and just the passing game in general as de facto run game, because they haven't been able to run the ball that well. So they have 3 great receivers, and they're, going to them an awful lot. For that reason, I would go Claypool over Washington.
Yeah, I'm on Claypool too. I never like going against Ed with lineup decisions and especially Hail Marys. But since we're not talking tight ends here, I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm also going to go Claypool. Best offensive situation of the three in that spot, but definitely a tough question from one of the show VIPs there. One more game to break down with you gentlemen. We have the Saints-Eagles matchup. Saints are a touchdown favorite on the road. I think this is the question that some people are wondering about. Who has a better finish down the stretch, Tyson Hill or Jalen Hurts? We'll go to you first, Ed.
I'm going to go for Taysom. I don't think he's more talented than Jalen Hurts. I just think that he's embedded in that system. He's got better players around him, and he's not in a complete dumpster fire of a situation. I think Philadelphia, we all know, is a mess, and anyone who invested in the Philadelphia offense at the start of the season has been badly burnt and probably won't be playing in the playoffs today, let's be honest. But yeah, Jalen Hurts, really talented player. I loved him at Alabama and before he transferred. But this, after he transferred. But yeah, no, this for me, Taysom Hill, unfortunately, he's looking like a viable fantasy quarterback. So that's the situation.
Yeah, I wonder how much Hill's years of being all over that offense actually helped him make that transition more quickly. Because I would agree with you. I don't think he has any more talent than a guy like Hurts, especially, but he's handled it well so far, better than expected. I, like many people, thought it was going to be Jameis Winston. I'm going to ask you, Beller, Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz, both healthy and back for the second time in as many weeks. Can they peacefully coexist, and how is their value impacted by the change at quarterback? It doesn't seem like things can be much worse through the air than they were with Carson Wentz at quarterback throughout this season.
Yeah, I'm not going to put too much stock into the quarterback change and how it might affect these guys. We just don't really know until we see it. And as you said, with the way this passing game has played, it's not as though things could get markedly worse. And I would say, yes, they can peacefully coexist, especially with what the state of the tight end position is. I will say that if we're looking at one of them as the one and one of them as the two, Goddard's the one. I mean, in every healthy game they've played, Goddard has been the more productive guy. And the way he's played over the last couple of weeks, they would be foolish to reduce his role in any significant way. So I feel really good about Dallas Goedert the rest of the season, and I feel fine about Zach Ertz. I wouldn't be surprised if they both gave us top 10 tight end production for the remainder of the year, but the way this team can run two tight ends has been very comfortable running two tight ends, and maybe you do end up having two tight ends out there with the probably added RPOs that we're going to see from the offense with Jalen Hurts. I just think both of them are going to be fine, but absolutely I am not sitting Dallas Goedert down 1 week this season. He is locked in a top 5 tight end for me.
Yeah, he's playing very well. A lot of two tight end sets likely from that Eagles offense down at the stretch. Ed, before we let you go, you hit on a Dan Arnold call last week. I couldn't believe it. It was like the first play of that game, or the first play of that game that I saw. I don't know where you pulled that one from, but you got anybody that stands out to you, either deep on the waiver wire or somebody even that just has kind of a fringy matchup that you feel really good about?
Yeah, there were a couple of good dart throws today in like prop bets and things like that. Like Chad Hansen, I think his line is 3.5 receptions. I kind of like Chad Hansen going over that line. I like Lynne Baldwin down in Miami. He played 31 snaps last week. I don't know if you know the story, but he was a quarterback in college. He's a kind of running back, receiver, gadget sort of guy, which is what Miami seemed to like. They also drafted Malcolm Perry out of Navy, who ran for like 2,000 yards as a QB, and he's a kind of running back, slot receiver hybrid, who they also really have a kind of big plan for. But no, Bowden, I think his line was about 25 yards or something, and I really like that this week because he played those snaps last week. He's in that system. And obviously, we've got the running back injuries, which mean they've had to use some different plans in practice this week. So, yeah, those are the two I like. Mac Hollins also for Miami, I think, with some injuries at receiver. So, some random ones for you. But, yeah, let's go for a bit of Lynne Baldwin today.
Random's fun. Random is your sweet spot, I think, finding those players that score unexpectedly for us. You've been having a heck of a run this season with those types of calls. Ed, enjoy Week 14. Good luck with your matchups. Look forward to talking to you again next week.
Thanks, guys. Great to see you.
That's Ed Mallion with the latest installment of Brits Picks, which, came in the form of game breakdowns. But his deep calls this season have been absolutely ridiculous. Let's move on and talk about Jock Market. It is the new way to play daily fantasy. Jock Market turns daily fantasy sports into a stock exchange. You can buy and sell shares of players, other users in real time, make money every hour, every minute, and every second of every game. Be sure to download the Jock Market app and use code Athletic10 for $10 in free play when you make a deposit. Simple, just make a deposit, enter Athletic10, and get a free $10. Again, that's download the Jock Market app, use the code Athletic10 for a free $10 when you make a deposit. Take control of your fantasy sports experience and download the app now in the App Store or the Google Play Store. Beller, I want to talk about some players that you like on Jock Market for Week 14. So what are you doing as you target that Packers-Lions matchup?
No bad way to get invested in the Packers today. Love Aaron Rodgers, love Aaron Jones, love Davante Adams from the Jock Market perspective. Very willing to pay up for them because I think we get top 1 performance out of Davante Adams at his position, top 3 performance out of Aaron Rodgers at his position, and a top 5 performance out of Aaron Jones at his position. And that's the way I'm going to go here. That's the argument I'm going to make is on behalf of Aaron Jones. Packers are going to run away with this one. Packers are going to take care of business against the Lions. They did it in week 2. They're going to do it again here. And Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams is always going to be that potential nag, but he's not always a nag for Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones, clearly the lead guy there, even if he's handling just 70% of the running back touches in this game for the Packers. He's going to have himself a monster performance. And the play here, the thinking here, why it's Aaron Jones over Aaron Rodgers or Davante Adams in the Jock Market world is a belief that Aaron Jones is going to come at a lower price when this IPO closes. So I feel pretty good about getting in on Aaron Jones. But again, no bad way to get invested in the Packers today.
Now, we have talked a lot about the Titans on our podcast this season as an undervalued offensive team. And I think one player in particular who continues to exceed expectations is Corey Davis. Are you going back to the well with that matchup against the Jags today?
100%. Another team that there's really no way to get invested in, but Corey Davis keeps coming cheap and he keeps delivering for us. One bad game. He has a 0 to his name this season. Other than that, the worst game he's had has been a 70-yard performance. I mean, Corey Davis is fulfilling the promise that he had years ago when he was the 5th overall pick, and it still feels as though that 5th overall pick and the lack of production over the last couple of years is coloring the way that people are treating him. But he is breaking out, not a moment too soon for him and his future, and certainly not a moment too soon for the Titans either. I think he's locked in as a regular fantasy starter, and still in the Jock Market marketplace, you're getting him treated as a guy who is, sort of a meh, whatever, yeah, I'll take a shot on him, but not someone who I'm super interested in. And the guy's giving us wide receiver 2 numbers week after week after week, and that will definitely play in a big way if you're able to get him at the price where it looks like you're going to be able to get him on Jock Market today.
Bucks Vikings also among the games this week with that high over-under total. If you're seeking out a player on Jock Market from that game, who do you like?
Yeah, I was actually looking at the receivers first, specifically Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. But then I said, you know what? Let's just go with the guy who's going to touch everything that goes to those 2 guys. How about Tom Brady? I think this is a really nice spot for him. Tom Brady, it's almost like we have these unfair expectations for him because of what he has done over his career and the fact that he doesn't seem to be aging in any material way. But the dude is still at 43 years old, right? And so coming off a bye after playing 12 straight games, I mean, it's going to be nice for him. It's probably nice for him to sit back, not have to practice, not have to worry about preparing for a game, having 2 weeks off, feeling refreshed. Love him coming off a bye in a matchup that, frankly, we shouldn't be too concerned about. The games where we've seen Tom Brady in this passing game get blown up are games where teams can get a ton of pressure on the quarterback and specifically up the middle, and we just haven't really seen that in a consistent way from Minnesota this season. So I think we see a big game, a good Tom Brady game, something on the order of 280 yards, 2 touchdowns. You're going to be very happy to have him in Jock Market.
Colts Raiders also among the games with a pretty nice total, and it seems like things are stabilizing at the running back position in Indianapolis. This is a matchup that you want to take advantage of. It's Jonathan Taylor week, isn't it?
JT on Wisconsin. What's up? Go Badgers. What's up? Jonathan Taylor, 2 games in a row that we've seen from him as the clear lead dog in Indy, and that's all we've been hoping for all season. We never thought this was going to be a situation where Nyheim Hines was totally gone. Even in recent weeks, we haven't thought this was going to be a situation where Jordan Wilkins was totally gone. We're not being unrealistic. All we've been asking for is Jonathan Taylor as the clear leader of the backfield, and we have now seen that for 2 games in a row. Remember, he had a COVID situation mixed in the middle, but 2 games that he has played in a row, we have seen him as the clear leader of Indy's backfield. He has done it on the ground. He has done it through the air. This Raiders defense just gave up 104 yards and a touchdown to Ty Johnson a week ago. Colts go into Vegas as favorites. I mean, all this lines up for a big game out of Jonathan Taylor. Absolutely love him this week.
Lot of love for Jonathan Taylor for me on Jock Market and in the DFS space as a tournament play because it seems like people are kind of staying away from him in a really nice matchup against the Raiders. Be sure to take control of your fantasy sports experience and download Jock Market now in the App Store. That includes you, Android users. Be sure to use the code Athletic10 for $10 in free play when you make a deposit. Got a few tidbits to pass along here before we break down the last few games. This one comes from our Bucks beat writer, Greg Allman. Intriguing if the Bucks give rookie Keyshawn Vaughn a look in the final month. He has just 73 yards of total offense this season, 42 in mop-up duty late in the win against the Packers. Of the top 15 backs drafted this year, only Lynne Baldwin and Darrington Evans have less yardage. But remember, Leonard Fournette inactive today, so Keyshawn Vaughn could get at least a few touches as a backup there. One more note to pass along. This one comes from NFL Network's Ian Rappaport. Browns tight end Austin Hooper is listed as questionable for Monday Night Football against the Ravens. He's not expected to play because of a neck injury. The team's going to monitor the situation and hope for improvement. But if you've got Austin Hooper, you probably want to pivot to your other option at tight end before the early games lock in about 40 minutes. Let's get back to a few more game breakdowns. 3 to go here. Falcons Chargers, two of the most disappointing teams in this season, will get together. And if I know anything about 2020, it's that these two teams will play a wildly exciting game full of fantasy goodness. Brandon, I'll start with you. Is Justin Herbert still a must start after a miserable game from the entire Chargers offense last week against the Patriots?
Yeah, this is a perfect rebound opportunity against the Falcons at home. We've seen Justin Herbert put too much good film out there so far. He's had one bad game, and so I'm in a great matchup like this. I'm absolutely back on board. Justin Herbert, who I think I have ranked in the top 6 this week, so we can't be so recency biased about what we saw last week. The Seahawks were one of the leading scoring teams in the league, and they just put up a dud against the Giants. It happens. It's the NFL. You got to have a short memory for some of this stuff and just look at the whole picture.
I want to ask you, Beller, about some of the deep threats in this Chargers offense. Daniel Popper, who covers the Chargers for The Athletic, offered up Jalen Guyton as a fantasy playoff hero. And you think about the Falcons, they have allowed the most completions of 20-plus yards in the league this season. So big plays could be aplenty for the Chargers offense. What's your interest level in Guyton this week?
Yeah, Guyton, I think, is a fine desperation play. I mean, we got to be realistic about his big playability. It has way more of a actual play for the Chargers than it does in the fantasy world. He is more of a real-life player as of right now in his career than he is a fantasy player because of what he brings to the Chargers offense, what he forces defenses to account for. His presence is very threatening, but it hasn't necessarily translated in a ton of fantasy production. So what I have to be playing Jalen Guyton, probably have to have some injuries, probably have to have some guys who have underperformed. Like maybe I would consider him maybe over someone like Tyler Boyd or someone like Darius Slayton, right? I mean, I think that's maybe where Jalen Guyton fits in, and I'm taking a shot on some upside, but you still have a huge target guy in Keenan Allen. You still have Mike Williams out there. You've got Austin Eckler, who's going to handle a ton of touches. Hunter Henry's going to get his 6.5 targets. So there's just not a lot of work for him potentially available, and that's really where you run into a problem with Jalen Guyton. You need that one big play, and you probably need it to be a touchdown because you're just not going to get very many opportunities.
Yeah, I think it is going to be a really limited number of targets for Guyton, barring an injury to one of the receivers there. But that matchup is one that I want to go after. I want to stack that game for DFS purposes. Want to go back to the well on Herbert. I'm with Brandon. I like his chances of really bouncing back in a pretty big way. I love the Sunday night matchup tonight. Steelers-Bills in Buffalo. Bills 1.5-point favorites. Over-under sitting at 48. I think as I look at this Pittsburgh offense, the guy that I'm most worried about in week 14 is actually James Conner. Like, how much has James Conner's stock fallen for you? Brandon, like, where do you rank him among running backs this week? Are you playing? I would imagine J.K. Dobbins over Conner makes a lot of sense at this point, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire came up a little bit earlier in the show. What would you do if you're looking at Edwards-Helaire versus James Conner this week?
I would actually go James Conner. He hasn't had a great year, but you go back and look at his game log, it's better than you kind of realize, and you feel good about the volume there. I don't think the matchup is terrible against Buffalo. Buffalo's not been a great defense this year, and I think he can have a little bit of success. I just go back to Kansas City and just how they have just shied away from the backfield completely. I feel better about the volume for James Conner overall. But yeah, he hasn't been up to the level we expect him to be. Not probably quite as bad as we think he is, though, either.
Yeah, but falling more into the volume guy that hasn't been efficient or as productive as expected, so you're not feeling great.
Early season David Montgomery is kind of like where we like to lump these guys as like the low upside volume guys, but volume still means something.
It does. Now, this Pittsburgh defense has lost a lot of players to injury. Devin Bush, Robert Spillane, Bud Dupree. As you think about this matchup for the Bills offense, are there any key pieces of the Bills offense, Beller, that you're steering away from this week going up against Pittsburgh?
Absolutely not. No way. No way. And even if they were at full strength, I would not be sitting these guys down. Put way too much stock in the matchup in the fantasy world, quite frankly. It is a tiebreaker for me. It is not a be-all, end-all, and it certainly is not something that comes into the equation when you're talking about someone like Josh Allen or someone like Stephon Diggs. If we were talking about this full-strength Buffalo or Pittsburgh defense, and I was making a decision between, Cole Beasley and someone else who was maybe on that wide receiver 3 borderline, then maybe defense comes into the equation here. But we've seen Buffalo be able to do what it wants to do, to run its offense, more often than not, strongly more often than not, all season long. And that's really where things are here. We live in an NFL world where offense dictates everything. Offense is the one who drives the game. This is not even just 5, 10, 15 years ago. This season. This is the way that the NFL has designed it. This is the way the NFL wants it. Offense dictates how games are played in this league. And when you have an offense like Buffalo's that has been so good at executing its stuff, I think you want to trust it. And definitely Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. So fire up your Bills as you normally would.
Let's move on to the Ravens-Browns Monday night matchup. We saw a nice fantasy performance from Lamar Jackson. Still wasn't great through the air, but this is the stretch we've been talking about for a few weeks. Like if you were looking for a Lamar Jackson bounce back down the stretch, his schedule in the fantasy playoffs is a very good one. So where did Jackson fall in your quarterback rankings this week, Brandon? How much confidence do you have in rolling him out there against the Browns?
Yeah, I don't know that he's back. I mean, he had 107 yards passing last week against Dallas. So, I mean, look at the safety net here for Lamar Jackson has always been the rushing yards, and he's still running like crazy. The weird thing is against Cleveland, you go back to week 1, it was like his best passing day of the year, 275 yards, 3 touchdown passes. He's got a matchup history with Cleveland, and normally matchup history means nothing, but he hasn't scored less than 26 fantasy points against Cleveland in 5 matchups against them. So you can throw the ball against Cleveland. They're going to be hard to run on, so maybe you can feel a little bit better about his passing numbers this week. But really for Lamar Jackson, it's that the floor is raised by his rushing yards, and for that reason, I believe I have him top 5 this week. I just, you feel good about a little better than normal about the passing, and the rushing is always going to be there.
Can still do a lot of damage with his legs. So yeah, I'm with you. I think he belongs among the top 5 quarterbacks this week because of that rushing ability. Question for you about Marquis Brown, Beller. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust him coming off these last 2 games in which he's been targeted 16 times? Like they've at least been throwing the ball in his direction. I know the quality of those targets is still a concern, but it seems like things are shifting a little bit in terms of where they're going, and giving him those opportunities makes me at least feel a little better. If he was a 1 or a 2 a few weeks ago, he's probably closer to a 3 or a 4 for me right now.
Yeah, I'm still in that range. You probably heard my dog Clyde. I think he was a little offended at that question also. I mean, it's been just such a down, not even up and down, just a down season for Marquis Brown. I think what we've seen from him in the last few weeks gives you confidence that he's not a total throwaway play. But Brandon just said it, 107 yards passing out of Lamar Jackson a week ago. I mean, it's not like this team is going to live through the air. And that's just the unfortunate reality for Marquis Brown, that maybe with the way this team runs, that his talents would be better suited elsewhere. This is what he's got for the time being, and I just don't think you can really feel better about him than maybe wide receiver 40. And we know that big play can be there, and we know that, and we talk about these things, we throw out these wide receiver 3, wide receiver 40 overall, we throw them out, they're really baseline terms, and I think that's what you have to expect from him, and then that big play is on the table, and if he hits the big play, then you're happy about him. But it's just, there are so few opportunities for the big play, and they have been way reduced from where they were for him a season ago when there was still so much less tape on Lamar and on him, frankly. And with that out there now, you're just not seeing him get as many shots deep down the field like he got last year. And I just don't really feel super confident in trotting him out there as anything other than a not quite desperation wide receiver 3.
The one guy I'm worried about on the Brown side of this game, who I've really liked in recent weeks, is Jarvis Landry. I don't like this matchup at all, especially in more shallow formats. Maybe where you start 2 receivers or a 10-teamer where you start 3. It seems like I'm doing everything I can to talk myself out of playing Jarvis Landry. Am I overly concerned, Brandon, or is this appropriate to start to downgrade expectations for him? Because I don't trust Baker Mayfield against the Ravens defense.
I don't either, but I do trust Jarvis Landry because it seems like he's getting healthy now, and this guy's always been one of the safer receivers to just give you serviceable numbers week in and week out. And as Jake mentioned it, Baltimore, you can hurt them in the slot. They've given up the most yardages to receivers in the slot among all teams. So that's just going to play right into Jarvis Landry's hands. I think you can run on Baltimore, and so I expect Cleveland to be fairly conservative. And Baker Mayfield, find me a game where he's really overcome a tough matchup. But if they do anything through the air, I think it's going to go through Jarvis Landry today or on a Monday night.
Yeah, I think anything they do get done, you're right. It does go through Landry at this point, especially if Austin Hooper's not going to be out there too. One fewer weapon in that Browns passing game just makes things really difficult for Baker. We got one more question to get to before we sign off for Week 14. Comes from Humboldt Parker, Duke Johnson, or DeAndre Washington in a PPR league. It's basically how much more do you believe in Washington than Duke? We've seen Duke try it for a few weeks. They're very similar in terms of what they bring, but Brandon, are you concerned that Washington doesn't have as much of a floor in the passing game as Duke Johnson does?
Well, this is just the devil you know versus the devil you don't know in my mind. And we know Duke Johnson. He's had these opportunities. He's done nothing with them. It's not a great matchup against Chicago. So for me, I'm just going to go with DeAndre Washington because what Brian Flores has done is he's just shoved random guys in there all year long, and they've done serviceably well or better. Myles Gaskin, Salvin Ahmed, now it's DeAndre Washington's turn. Would you be surprised if he puts up, 75 yards, gets a couple passes, and that's probably going to do better than Duke Johnson. So I think they're probably a close call, but I'll go with the guy that I haven't seen a whole lot of and have some hope for some upside there just because Miami's been pretty faithful at just leaning on one guy in the backfield.
Yeah, in the fantasy world, the devil you don't know is often the one you want to go with because no matter what DeAndre Washington does today, it's almost certainly going to match what Duke Johnson does, right? A touchdown for either of these guys, totally blows things out of the water. But I'm open on DeAndre Washington having the higher touchdown upside in a game that could be relatively high scoring against the Chiefs. And Brandon's been on this for a week. On this 4 weeks, I'll drive it home here. Miami has not played too many games in terms of mixing and matching 3 different backs. They've had one guy who they've featured in every game this season. And even though that guy has changed due to injury, it's been one guy. And there's really no reason to think that it's not going to be DeAndre Washington as the leader of the backfield here today. So I will take that over Duke Johnson, who we've just seen time and time again give us very, very lukewarm production.
I'll make it 3 for 3. I'll take Washington over Duke Johnson in that situation as well. So hopefully that's the right call for you, Humboldt Parker. Gentlemen, good luck to you in your fantasy playoff matchups this week. Enjoy Week 14.
All right, thanks.
There's not enough fantasy playoff matchups for me this year, unfortunately. But
W time, guys. Let's move on. Advance.
I got more than my fair share, so hopefully I'll get through for a couple of them for you, Brandon.
We can switch spots the rest of the year if you want. I can tee you up on all the good advice since your teams are more successful.
Well, I'll mull that over between now and next Sunday, but that is going to wrap things up for our Week 14 episode of the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by JockMarket. Take control of your fantasy sports experience and download JockMarket now in the App Store. That includes Android users as well. Use the code Athletic10 to get that free $10 with your first deposit. You get all of our written fantasy football content from the stretch run, including Jake's rankings. It's a buy one, get one free offer right now at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. You buy a 1-year subscription, you get one to give to a friend or a loved one for free. It's a great deal. Be sure to check that out. For Jake Seeley, Brandon Funston, Michael Beller, Ed Mallion, and our man behind the scenes, Nando DeFino, I'm Derek Van Riper. Thanks for watching. Good luck in Week 14.